Was this a binary decision to adopt this lifestyle, or did you gradually work your way into it?
It was gradual, but there were a few inflection points. I got physically ill for a while, so I had to rethink my life choices and priorities. I started meditating, doing yoga, etc., and realized that I could be perfectly happy being alone. And there were a few moments of inspiration. I'll point out a couple. A friend of mine made the comment to me that he never wanted to have to be in a specific place at a specific time. And that to me immediately tasted like freedom. And I never let go of that vision. I was inspired by Mark Andreessen's essay on productivity, which starts with, "Don't keep a schedule." It's an interesting question, though. I don't think I would have been able to pull off the harder parts of it without daily meditation, and I'll tell you why. During meditation, most of the time, it doesn't feel like anything useful is happening. Your mind is just going nuts. You're fighting over things. You're turning things over in your head. But often, when you come out, you have deep, deep conviction. You're ready to make changes because you've really given yourself the space to think through your problems, and you come out with answers from within. You've escaped from the normal hustle bustle of everyday life and really gone deep on your issues. It's like a therapy session every single day with yourself, where you're completely and totally honest.
Do you think people who are early in their career and not yet financially stable can adopt a lifestyle like this?
I have some thoughts on it, but the first answer is I don't care. I'm going to strawman you for a moment. People on the internet like to attack each other for saying, well, that's from a position of privilege. You know, when you tell somebody, hey, you should walk more every day, they say, well, people who don't have legs can't walk. And I find this kind of virtue signaling where you can dunk on people and say, well, it doesn't apply to everyone, therefore you shouldn't be allowed to talk about it, is just another form of silly Marxism and trying to look good, trying to look moral without actually having to do anything. But yeah, if I had my life to do over again, I would probably have done some of this more aggressively when I was younger. Adapt my lifestyle. I would have to make some changes in the nature of the work that I did. So probably more investing and more creativity around the founding rule and less 9 to 5 in the office. I could have had lesser needs when I realized that I can only live in one room at a time. So for a long time, having more than one room to myself wouldn't be that important. I could have substituted activities for each other, like meditation for making better decisions as opposed to going out at night. I could have worked more on building a passive income than an active income. The rejection of social obligations is something that I could have just realized from the start. I don't need to go to weddings and eat the rubber chicken and give the speech and do the same dance every time. And most importantly, I could have removed the people from my life who demanded that I live a life of obligation and schedule. There are people living in Thailand and Bali on $20 a day who are very happy and very free. And they work remotely a little bit when they need to, but otherwise, they live an even better version of the life that I'm talking about. They just made the hard choices. Anyone who is already capable of remote work can live this life today while still building a quote-unquote career to whatever extent that's useful.
Is there any particular piece of freedom that tastes the sweetest to you?
Yes, it's not having to wake up to alarm clocks or to check a calendar. I still do have appointments, so I'll have an infrequently checked calendar for doctor's appointments and the like, which will usually alert me the day before. And then for any more timely things, I have to keep it in my head. So if I have a meeting tomorrow at 11 a.m. that I have to attend, then I have to keep it in my head. If I cannot keep it in my head, then I just simply don't have space for it in my life. This keeps me from having current Naval make commitments for future Naval. Basically, current Naval has to do things currently. If he's making commitments for future Naval, well, future Naval is just not going to follow through, just like current Naval didn't want to follow through.
Naval, this is incredible and resonates so deeply with me. When I was younger, I left engineering to be a skydiver. Everyone thought I was crazy. I traveled all over the world and took breaks from jobs to go be in Europe. I worked as a bartender, which everyone thought was crazy, but I had a huge amount of freedom and I absolutely loved it. But then, also there's downsides to it. Like, obviously I got hurt skydiving. Being willing to go and live with no rules associated with you, sometimes for me with not much money, meant that sometimes I'd be in positions where I was in real danger and I had real deprivation in terms of food and a place to live and things like that. So I would end up having these conversations and I'd tell people about skydiving and traveling and these things, and they'd be like, "Oh, you're so lucky, I can't, that you've done all that." And I never said this to people, but it's like, no, it's not fucking luck, okay? It was a choice, and I paid for it, and I'm glad to do it, and it's entirely available to you as well. But me having gone to be a professional skydiver, having lived in Europe for 8 months, have done all this stuff, that was not luck. It was sacrifice. Now, granted, it wasn't anything special either, but don't call it luck. It isn't luck. They're choices. And at a certain point, I just decided I just wasn't going to care about social expectation, where literally people would ask me something that I didn't want to talk about. I would just say, that's none of your fucking business, period. That was my answer for years. I didn't have a phone for years. My mom and my girlfriend, way back when, conspired to get me for a phone. When I was traveling and living in LA and going all over the place, I never had furniture. I rented out furnished rooms. I had clothes and books. That's it. And the clothes just because I'm cheap. I don't want to throw them out. And the books just because I can't throw them out. It's a thing of mine. So I love that monk lifestyle, and the happiest times of my life have been really poor, a wedge of cheese in my bag and almost dying on Crete. And it's there too. But I will say that society is set up in such a way that when you make these choices, there's very little safety net available to you in these particular circumstances. Now, I've been extraordinarily lucky, and I think people should live a life that aligns with their choices, but also let's not pretend there's zero danger, and so you've got to be okay with it. Now, you can't escape danger regardless, so it's fine. But anyway, Naval, I love this. Good job.
It feels like as we progress as a society, we have more and more personal and professional obligations. I wonder why this is.
It's the general trend of technology giving us more and more options, and so we slice things up thinner and thinner into smaller and smaller blocks of time, into less and less deep relationships, into less and less focus. It's not necessarily wrong with that. You want optionality, but at the same time, you need focus as well. There's this idea that, hey, if my calendar wasn't full and if I didn't check my email, how would I be productive? Well, I would argue that's why you're not being productive. The only form of productivity that matters now is creativity. And for creativity, you need large blocks of free time. Also, you want to be able to work on whatever's most urgent at the moment. And for that, you need lots of big blocks of free time. And finally, you want to strike when inspiration does. And for that, you need large blocks of free time. Thus my glib tweet, the overscheduled life is not worth living.
When you discover one of those moments of sublime creative inspiration, what do you do?
I just create. I have the time.
If a brilliant physicist created a time machine, would you go back to being your 17-year-old self, knowing what you know now?
No, for all sorts of reasons, but time travel is a paradox. If you could send me back in time, it would destroy my current understanding of the world. I would then need a new logical, scientific understanding of the world that still made sense to me and didn't somehow introduce paradoxes. So I think the only way it could work is if you sent me into another universe, and I don't want to go to another universe. I don't want to do it all over again. This life is fine. Where I am is fine. There's no need to have regrets or to dwell on the past.
And I had just left my corporate job at that time. I had a fancy title and a lot of responsibility, but really low pay. So I think I definitely at that time could categorize as earlier in my career. I feel like I can speak to this one on a first person account because when I first found Naval's work, I didn't know his like professional work. I just liked what he talked about philosophy and how to live. And I think I found the work very inspiring and it was always something on my mind. So even though maybe a lot of it I couldn't do at that time, it was something that I really focused on and knew I wanted to get. So even if I had to work a lot more now than I wanted to in the future, it was always on my mind about like how I could free myself from it. Versus I think prior to learning his work, and it's not just Naval, there's a few other people, but I think he was, articulate as he always is. It gave me really permission to focus on it. So I think if I never heard it, I might have been caught in the labor cycle more and not in the, work smarter cycle.